Good evening, everybody. I welcome you all to today's lecture where we'll be discussing the answers to the exam that happened on the first. Basically, the first shift is what we'll be talking about right now. So, without further delay, let's dive straight into the topic of discussion, which is answers to a few questions which I have received from a few of our students who have appeared for the exam this time around. So, yeah, we're basically talking about the first shift. The one that happened in the afternoon will be on another day. In one of the upcoming days, we'll be talking about that also. So, for now, we'll talk about the various questions that were asked and also the answers to these various questions is what we'll be talking about right now. The first is, excuse me. Yes, the first is basically to do with concepts. The first concept is bricolage. Now, bricolage is a concept by Claude Lévi-Strauss, who's basically a structuralist. So, this is a concept from structuralism. The next concept by power is from Michel Foucault. The next is chronotope. Chronotope, as we all know, is the concept of Bakhtin. And heresy of paraphrase is again from a new critic. This is a concept from new criticism, which is from Cleant Brooks. So yes, these are the various terms and these are the people or the various schools to which these various terms belong. The next question was pertaining to the term aesthetics. Now, aesthetics is a term that was coined by Alexander Baumgarten in the year 1735. So, this is actually the year when the term was coined. It is 1735. The next is the term globalization. Now, globalization is a term that is associated with culture studies. In your preparation of culture studies, you must have come across this term globalization, which is basically a term that is associated with Roland Robertson. The next is a poem that is made up of 999 lines. You had different poems in the option and then you had to pick up the one with 99 lines and the answer is Pale Fire. Now, Pale Fire is basically a poem by Vladimir Nabokov. So, yes, that is the answer to this particular question. Moving on, you had a question on Romanticism, which is a work from the Romantic age, which is Messipo. Now, this is a work by Lord Byron. Byron is the author or the writer of Messipo. The next is Way of the World. Way of the World, I told you earlier, also is a restoration comedy where love and intrigue are the main themes. So, love and intrigue are the main themes of the Way of the World. Now, Way of the World is a play by Congreve, which was not very well accepted at the time when it was written. So, there are also other videos where I talk about drama and questions related to drama. I'll leave a link to that video also in the description. So in that video, I discussed about the Way of the World and also about a few other restoration comedies. The next is Harold Skimpole. Now this is a character from Dickens's work Bleak House. So the answer is Bleak House. The next is which of Larkin's poems deals with a rape victim? So the answer to this question is deception. So deception is where it basically talks about a rape victim after the rape has actually taken place. It's basically a conversation that's happening between the rapist and the victim. So that is the poem Deception by Philip Larkin. The next is which text asks a direct question to its audience. So again, you had various options and obviously it is a postmodern text. That's the answer. So the answer is Italo Calvino's If on a Winter's Night a Traveler. So that is the text which asks a direct question to the audience. In fact, it asks a lot of questions. It is directly addressed to the audience in fact. So yes, the next is where you had to arrange these writers in chronological order and you also had these various options as well. So talking about Jane Austen. Now Jane Austen, as we all know, lived during the Romantic age. She is rather a romantic novelist. So the first person is Fanny Burney. She was born in the year 1752. The second in the list is Maria Edgeworth. So she was born in 1768. The third is Jane Austen. She was born in the year 1775. And the fourth is Anne Bronte. So she was born in 1820. So Bronte sisters are all Victorian writers, and also Bronte sisters are what constitutes the famously called Stormy Sisterhood. So Stormy Sisterhood refers to the three Bronte sisters. So yes, that's another piece of information. Another question which was in the form of arranging in chronological order was these works which are there on the screen right now. Modest Proposal, School for Scandal, and Lives of Poets, and also Mrs. Dalloway. Now let's just talk about the writers first. This is a work that was written by Jonathan Swift. Now this is a restoration comedy by Sheridan, who's also written The Rivals. Lives of Poets is by Samuel Johnson. And Mrs. Dalloway is by Virginia Woolf. So now this to some extent shows the chronological order in which it would have perhaps been written. So yes, now Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift was written in the year 1729. And Sheridan's restoration comedy School for Scandal was written in 1777. Samuel Johnson's Lives of Poets was written in 1779. Rather, these are the years when they were published. And Mrs. Dalloway was written in the year 1925. So yes, this is the chronological order in which you arrange these works. Now actually I had put them in chronological order. This is the first one. This is the second work, the third, and the fourth. Yes, moving on, we had a question from Dr. Faustus as well, where you had to find out the mythical character to whom Faustus is compared in the prologue. So, in the prologue, he is compared to Icarus. Now, Icarus is basically a character who has wings made of wax. Sorry. So yes, and also there's a reference to Icarus and Daedalus. So please look up and find the relationship between Icarus and Daedalus, because it's a very interesting story. Daedalus is also referred to in Ulysses, and also a portrait of an artist as a young man. So please look up and find the connection between Icarus and Daedalus. Now if in case you know the relationship between Icarus and Daedalus also, you could mention it in the comments section. The next is the source of the Duchess of Malfi. Now, the Duchess of Malfi, it comes under a revenge, under the genre called revenge tragedy or Senecan tragedy. Now, the work was actually written by Webster. He has written two very famous works, The Duchess of Malfi and also The White Devil. So this work by Webster is something that has an Italian origin. It is from an Italian novella titled The Palace of Pleasure, which is a collection by William Painter. So the answer is The Palace of Pleasure. The work was actually written in 1567. I mean, Palace of Pleasure was written in 1567. The next is again based on the theme of Poetics by Aristotle. Now, Poetics is actually a treatise that talks about tragedy in general, and also about the art of writing poetry. Poetry in the broader sense of the term means literature. So he basically talks about how art is nothing but an imitation. So the main focus is on imitation. So he basically talks about how art is an imitation. So that's the main theme, or that's basically what Poetics talks about. The next is this particular quote. It is from Waiting for Godot, and you had to identify the character who says, "They give birth astride of a grave. The light gleams of an instant, that then it's night once more." So this is basically from Pozo, who is one of those characters in Waiting for Godot. So yeah, this is the answer. Pozo is actually the answer. I mean, he is the person who says this particular sentence. The next is where you have to find out the three types of poetry as given by Sidney in his apology for poetry. So the first thing is philosophical poetry. The next is religious poetry. And the next is poetry which is an imitation or poetry which is imaginative. Sorry. Which is an imaginative representation of nature and life. So yes, that is exactly what Sydney calls as the third category of poetry, which is a very true imitation or an imaginative representation of nature and life. So these are the three types of poetry as given by Philip Sidney. Now moving on, you had to arrange these magazines in order. Now there were four magazines of which students were actually not able to remember the exact four magazines, but then I've picked up six magazines which are more or less the same. So the first is Rambler. Rambler is basically associated with Samuel Johnson. It was from the year 1750 to 1752. And there were about 200 articles in this particular magazine. The next is Gentleman's Magazine, which is in vogue in 1631, and it also went on till 1922. So yes, the next is Quarterly Review. Quarterly Review was actually it began in 1809 and Edinburgh Review in 1802. The next is Critical Review. Now Critical Review was by Smollett. So the year when it was started is 1756. The next is Monthly Review. Monthly Review is basically a magazine that's based in New York. So yeah, it is of a very recent origin. So 1941 was when the first edited edition of the magazine was released. So that's with all these magazines, and you had to arrange them in chronological order. So this explains the order. The next is again where you had to arrange these restoration plays in chronological order. The first is Country Wife. Now Country Wife is by William Wycherley. The year when it was written is 1675, and All for Love by Dryden is basically again a representation or a retelling of Antony and Cleopatra. So this is basically something that was written in 1677. So yeah, this is again, they were not able to remember the other two works again. So yes, the next question is with regard to my acquaintance with poets by William Hazlitt. So who are those two poets who are mentioned in my acquaintance with poets by William Hazlitt is the question. The answer is William Wordsworth and also Coleridge. So these two are the people who are actually mentioned in my acquaintance with poets by Hazlitt. The next is who said blank verse is no verse at all. The person who said this is Dryden, and he also said this in essay on dramatic poesy. The next is again about a text. Now this is from a reader response theory. You have to find out who said a text should be interpreted in the context of historical and cultural aspects. Who said this? It is Wolfgang Iser. Wolfgang Iser is the person who actually said this. Yes, the next is with regard to English in India. Rajaram Mohan Roy wrote a letter to promote English education in India. To whom was it addressed is the question. So the letter was addressed to Lord Amherst. It's not Macaulay, but it is Amherst. So the letter was addressed to Lord Amherst. Yes, the next is again pertaining to works and the people who wrote them, or the works and the authors. You have to match them. Lamia is a work that was written by Keats. Now this is again about about all those romantic elements, and it is also mythical in nature. So Lamia is basically a mythical work that was written by Keats. Alastor or Queen Mab is another work. Another name. So yeah, this was again written by Shelley. Lady Charlotte is by Tennyson, and Pied Piper is by Robert Browning. So this is the answer. The next question is a defense of rhyme is a work by Samuel Daniel. Yes, yeah, we have covered most of these works in our online classes as well. So yeah, I had mentioned to you about how there was a fight about which rhyme to use, and in that instance, we have spoken about Samuel Daniel's work, A Defense of Rhyme, as well. The next is William Blake's Songs of Experience. Now, he has also written Songs of Innocence. Songs of Innocence and Experience are by William Blake. So, yes, the next is Advancement of Learning. Advancement of Learning is a work by Bacon. Yeah, he's basically somebody who has written also a number of these essays, and you also need to know the number of essays, how many essays were there in the first edition, how many were there in the second edition, and all such things as well. And also, he has written another very famous work, which is New Atlantis, the setting of which is again asked a number of times. So yes, another question was pertaining to the sections of the English Coach, which is a work by Thomas De Quincey. So you had to find the various sections. The first is the glory of motion and the vision of sudden death. So yes, this is the right answer to this question as well. So with that, we've discussed around 25 questions, so with their corresponding answers. Now if in case somebody has a doubt, you could send in your queries to this mail ID which is there on your slide, or you could also feel free to call the WhatsApp number which is there on the slide. So yes, with that we've discussed around we had discussed around 20 questions, and now we've discussed 25 other questions. Now these are not questions which were discussed in the earlier video. So if in case you want to know the answers to those questions as well, so please check out that video. I've left the link to that video as well in the description. So yes, if in case anybody has a doubt, please mention in the comments section also. Yes, Shilpa ma'am will also be discussing the evening shifts paper in a day or two. So yeah, we'll also be discussing the evening shifts paper as well. You could send in either a mail or a message to the WhatsApp number. So yes, thank you. Hope the session was useful to all. And once we are ready with the answer key to the second shift as well, we'll be posting it again in the channel. So please be stay tuned for more updates, and also do subscribe to the channel for more information.